into education by financing the missionaries to do the work for them. The same commission introduced classification of education in different ways. We are leaving the classes that I have just told you, and we are beginning primary 1 to primary 6. 6 years of primary education, 3 years of junior secondary education, and then 3 years of senior secondary education. Sara and Ntiro's birth in 1925 coincided with the establishment of the Department of Education by the British colonial government. Its first director, Eric Hasse, and his officers worked in cooperation with the missionaries who continued to administer the old schools and establish new ones. The department's purpose was to strengthen education by laying down common syllabi and examination regulations and giving certification of candidates which the expertise in missionaries lacked. Despite the above measure, the colonial government aimed at addressing financing of education. Access for girls remained restricted to a great extent. For example, the concept note for today's lecture shares that of University of Oxford, where Sara Ntiro pursued her Bachelor of Arts in History and was awarded degree graduate on the 7th of October 1920. This says a lot for a university that had started way back in 1096. So all those centuries, no woman saw the gate of that university until then. Well, of today's bold ideas need system support to thrive. Without a system support, our bold ideas in respect of girls, child education, or any other cause may never gain traction needed to cause far-reaching impact. A good illustration of this is the relentless effort that it took to get the pioneer 6 female students of Makerere College to get admitted. Makerere, you remember, started in 1922. It didn't open its gates to girls until 1945. Female missionaries, in particular, Mary Stuart, who had, prior to coming to Uganda, advocated for women's education in England, not only raised funds, but also lobbied for women's admission into Makerere College. Mary Stuart was the wife of Bishop Simon Edgar Stuart, the 3rd bishop of the Diocese of Uganda and Boga Zaire from 1932 to 1952. Her position as the bishop's wife meant that there was no door she could not knock at. There was no door that she could not persuade to open, be it the protectorate government to admit girls to Makerere College. She could also open the door of the at any time, and nothing was beyond her reach. This is why you find we have a Mary Stuart Hall here, because of the great work she did for us. Mary Stuart was later joined by Margaret Graham. Margaret Graham also came from Oxford, who had been appointed. She was recruited But however, upon arriving in Uganda, she found that the protectorate government had changed their minds about admitting girls, and she was instead posted as a lecturer in the Department of Education. The excuse by the protectorate government was that there was only one girl in King's College Budo who was about to qualify to enter Makerere College, and that was no other than Catherine Senkatuka, the mother of Dr. Alan Shonbe, the lawyer. Faced with this predicament, Mary Stuart and Margaret Graham embarked on a campaign throughout Uganda, Kenya, Tanganyika, and Zanzibar in order to persuade bright young female teachers to attempt Makerere College special entry exams. 4 of these teachers passed entry exam and were joined by another bright girl directly from King's College Budo, adding 6 girls, 166 men admitted. Margaret Graham often told us, when I say told us because she was my warden, Margaret Graham often told us during our interactions that beyond persuading the protectorate government, Mary Stuart persuaded the women of Mothers Union around Namirembe to write to the governor of Uganda. Despite their little education and broken English, these women went ahead and wrote to the governor, petitioning him to admit their daughters to Makerere College. One of them was Mary Senkatuka's mother, and also mother of Catherine Senkatuka. And Mary Senkatuka, who later became the first female permanent secretary in Uganda. When Mary Stuart, Margaret Graham, and lady activists next interacted with the protectorate government, they were armed with a list of 6 girls who qualified to join Makerere College, leaving the officials no choice but to bow to the pressure and let them in. When I came to Makerere in 1953, Margaret Graham was the warden of the girls. We resided in what is now Makerere University Guest House. We were only 13 girls in Makerere at that time. The warden's house was the wooden part of the guest house, and that's how we got the nickname, the box. Although it followed Mary Stuart when it moved. Towards the end of 1953, Mary Stuart Hall was completed and named after Mary Stuart, who had worked hard for the betterment of women education during her time in Uganda. And in many girls' schools, you will find a dormitory named after Mary Stuart. When we moved into the new Mary Stuart Hall, now I include myself because I'm one of the 13. When we moved into new Mary Stuart Hall, the 13 of us could only fill the first floor only. The second and third floors were left unoccupied. And not the whole of Mary Stuart, only the oldest part of it. However, by the time I left Makerere, we were 50 girls, and so the third floor got occupied. Our warden, Margaret Graham, often gathered us in the evenings and told us about has struggled with Mary Stewart to persuade the protectorate government to admit girls to Makerere College. We were always motivated by these talks and helped us to better appreciate the ladies' selfless acts. And she warned us that if you go wrong, you'll be blocking the room or the way forward for many, many other girls. Now this brings me, what would Sara Nyenwoha do or say in the present day? If she came amidst us, if she was talking to you instead of me, what do I think she would say? Makerere, I know, has taken a number of commendable steps in as far as creating system support for bold ideas to thrive in concerned. Sara Ntiro would be very proud of, and she was proud of before she died, of the 1990 implementation of Makerere University affirmative action in favor of female applicants, known as 1.5 scheme to increase the number of female students admitted. Second, in 2019, your approval of affirmative action policy providing for the 40% enroll quota for female students in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The other change I think she would love would be the 2019 amendment of policy and regulations against sexual harassment and launch of the Vice Chancellor's standing roster of 100 to investigate complaints reported by students and staff. And lastly, the 2021 move by Makerere University Council to double the number of awards under the Female Scholarship Initiative from 20 to 40. There may be others that I have overlooked. You let us know. The above advancement notwithstanding, Sara Ntiro would still advocate and complain in her small, weak voice. First, she would complain about an analysis of the impact of 1.5 action scheme over 30 years since, and remedial action that needs to be taken to help the boy child. Because while we are helping the girl child, we should not forget that we also have boy children. Second, she would still say need a comprehensive evaluation of barriers to the full utilization of the 40% enrollment quota for female in STEM that I have referred to above, and creation of mentorship networks for male and female staff, as well as alumni, to address these through aggressive knowledge transfer activities at secondary and primary education level. Third, I think should talk about use of feedback from the Vice Chancellor's standing roster of 100 to intensify sensitization campaigns and reduce the knowledge gaps and gender-based violence, abuse, and sexual harassment that exist among staff and students, as well as the wider university community. Lastly, should complain about the need to increase the number of girls under female scholarship initiative to at least 100, not just 40. And when you ask her where will the extra funding come from, she will tell you solicitors from Makerere, hundreds of thousands alumni spread across the globe. One thing I would like to say at this point is that Sara Ntiro was an articulate woman. When I was returning from my further studies in the United States, I went through London. I was invited by Sara Ntiro and her husband to stay with them in London. Ntiro was High Commissioner of Tanganyika to Britain at that time. During that time, Sara had appeared in either radio or television, I can't remember, but she had appeared, I don't quite recall, with Archbishop of Canterbury. And when asked what part of Tanganyika she came from, she said, "I'm a Ugandan." And the Uganda High Commission was flooded with congratulatory letters, with telephone calls for having produced such a beautiful lady like Sara Ntiro, who could appear with the Archbishop of Canterbury. Of course, Tanganyika was envious, but the fact that although she spoke softly, Sara was very articulate. One attribute I would like to put her is that she's one who pushed me into being a fighter for women. When I stood up, when I went to Legislative Council, when I stood up to talk in my maiden speech, after it, the Chabazinga of Busoga, the Nadiope, who was the father of my friend Nancy, who were with me at Makerere, came around, put his arms around me and said, "My daughter, you spoke like a man." I felt very insulted, and I did tell Sara, who was also a member of Legislative Council then. In response, Sara told me, "You to where women meet and talk about themselves." She introduced me to Uganda Council of Women, whereas I had started before, I had never joined. Whereas I had started before, I had never joined it. And in my biography, I say she changed my direction. I now became a fighter for women. One thing I would also like to point out is that Sara Ntiro, one attribute I want to put to her is that she's one who pushed me. Proverbs chapter 20, as a lion. The attribution of boldness to one's awareness of his or her right standing with God and man is a good point on which to reflect Sara Ntiro's life. When the colonial government attempted to pay her less money, when she started working, when she came back, she was posted as a teacher at Gayaza. She was paid less money than her male teachers with same academic qualification. She rejected the salary and decided to teach without pay. So impactful was her protest that Lady Anne Cohen, the governor's wife, heard of it, setting precedent that stood for the rest of her life, and also laying a foundation for all of us who followed her. Because when I started, I was given equal amount as the men who left Makerere with me. Give her a good clap, because that was very bold. My thoughts on how we can accomplish what remains undone I've said that. Whereas bold ideas thrive under appropriate system support, new ones can also be stifled when the system does not evolve to meet changing trends in respect. Financing of public institutions such as schools and universities and the various projects therein needs to be re-examined thoroughly with the aim of enabling them to develop their land resources or undertake various investments in infrastructure within the tenets of enabling laws and clear arbitration mechanisms. The proliferation of technology has made communication much easier and less expensive than it was a decade ago. This has led to limitless forms of expression, although not all of them beneficial. Whereas it's much easier to share our bold ideas, our society and the youth in particular need to be helped to distinguish between the bold and what is utopian. All advances in the use of technology and communication ought to be viewed thoroughly through the lens of African culture that prize courtesy, decency, respect for others, and living within our means, and the values above all that our globalizing setting attempts do dream as good or acceptable. The life and legacy of Sara offer a sound point of reflection on how the alignment of bold ideas and systems that support them can lead to enormous impact whose effect vibrates through generations. We have also witnessed that although it is not the guarantee of lifetime of personal and professional achievements, the role of supportive parents and their influence in early childhood development cannot be overlooked, especially in the face of prevalent marginalization both by culture and the state. Furthermore, bold ideas can never really be meaningful national impact, can never really have meaningful national impact unless they are undergirded by the right policy environment. Enactment of good policies pave way for the individuals and non-government agencies and resources to invest in various sectors, which in turn boost the overall well-being of the population. Be that as it may, Sara and Ntiro also faced a number of challenges in the expression of their bold ideas. Whereas she had excelled in mathematics at King's College Budo, her choice to study mathematics as the only female in a class of 32 at Makerere was cut short when the lecturer walked out of the class due to her presence. She eventually left the class out of consideration for her male colleagues, a true act of sacrifice, but it did hurt her because she always talked about it. Secondly, her admission to the University of Oxford was not plain sailing. She had to struggle to get in by studying Latin as a second language, in addition to language, in order to fulfill one of the strict language entry requirements. As fate would have it, Nyendoha had secured teaching position in Kibambe Girls' School. She talked good Lunyoro. She talked fluent Luganda. She was quite advanced in English, but Oxford could not consider English as her second language. She had to learn another language. So she had to learn Latin alongside the clergy while continuing to teach in her classes at Chebambe. Upon completion of her Latin classes, she attempted the proficiency test at the St. Mary's Seminary, Virica in Fort Portal, and having passed, was admitted at St. Anne's College, University of Oxford. When I joined Makerere in 1953, as I told you, we were often regaled by our wooden tales of Sara Nyendoha. Upon return from Oxford in 1954 with a degree, Sara was the blue-eyed girl of the protectorate government and the governor in particular. She was worshipped everywhere. She went, so profound was her impact on Governor Cohen that when he opens his book, which he wrote about Uganda, he praises Sara Ntiro at the Golden Jubilee of Gayaza High School, where Sara was a teacher. There was a pageant commemorating 50 years, and Sara came into the venue driving a tractor. The Governor Cohen said this heralded a new era of education in Uganda. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, it would be unfair of me to conclude my remarks without mentioning Forum for Africa Women Educationists, FAWE, an organization started by African women ministers who attend the World Conference on Education for All in Jomtien, Thailand in 1991. That is what helped us to start a universal primary education here in Uganda, because at the end of it, we all held hands and promised that there will be PLE in all our countries by the year 2000. Did we make it? No. As Deputy Minister of Primary Education then, I had led the Uganda delegation, and out of belief in we started FAWE to uplift the women in decision-making positions and enable them to make significant difference. Later, when we started FAWE Uganda, we chose Sara Ntiro as befitting role model for the annual lecture and award for women who have worked to facilitate girl-child education. I'm happy that this initiative continues to mentor young girls and boys, award women of distinction, and provide higher education scholarships. I look forward to hearing from the Executive Director of FAWE Uganda, who I am reliably informed will be one of the panelists in the discussion that follow. It is therefore my humble prayer that today's reflection on the life and legacy of Sara Ntiro will inspire each and every one of us to put forth our bold ideas, provided they are righteous, or put in place the necessary systems to support them to enable the bold ideas to thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very, very much, Honorable Joyce Mpanga. It has been deep, it has been incisive, it has been reflective. It has not only helped us to learn about the life and legacy of Sara Ntiro, in several aspects, it has also enabled us to understand the evolution of our very university much better. Thank you so much. When Enid was speaking, she spoke about Bishop Nathan Chamanya. He has just sent us his message of regret. He wanted so much and wished to be here today on this special day, but because of developments beyond his control, he hasn't been able to make it, but he's with us in spirit. Now, Performing Arts and Film has requested, not now, please stay seated a bit, that they want to perform Olunyege, because Sara Ntiro loved Olunyege so much. I am hoping that we shall have time for that. And we should try our best to have time for that. If we do not get that time, please don't blame me. Blame the person I'm going to introduce next. If we do not get time for Olunyege, you're not going to blame me, but the person I'm going to introduce next, whom I already introduced before, Associate Professor Sara, who is the Dean of the School of Women and Gender Studies, member of the Appointments Board. Appointments Board is very powerful in this university. Those who are staff know, of course. And member of the University Council, is also our moderator for the panel discussion. She has a very distinguished panel of panelists, and I don't want to spoil anything by trying to introduce them when she's here herself. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Professor Sara to take us through the next session, and also to request her to make time for Olunyege.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very privileged to be here, especially as we are celebrating Sara Ntiro, because the School of Women and Gender Studies exists because of Sara Ntiro and her colleagues who got together under ACFOD to say, in addition to the activism they have held around the country, they needed an institution that would systematically train gender experts to help the government in its mainstreaming agenda. So we thank you, Sara Ntiro. We thank you, Honorable Joyce Mpanga, Dr. Maxine Ankra, who sent her apologies, would have loved to be here. That was their bold idea. Of course, we have also Professor Joy Kwesiga, Professor Victoria Mwaka, and many others. So we are very happy to be here, and we are here because of the giants like Honorable Sara Ntiro and her colleagues who made it possible for us to be here. I have a distinguished panel. I'm remembering that we're supposed to make time for Olunyege because Sara Ntiro loved it. So our distinguished panel has, the first person is Anne Reisman. Anne Reisman is the country director of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Uganda and South Sudan. She has been in international cooperation for about 15 years. She was previously based in Ukraine. She has also been based in Brussels and also in charge of the CAS offices in Latin America. She's currently the country director of the CAS office in Uganda and South Sudan, and she holds a diploma in international business and intercultural studies. You're very welcome, Anne. Our next distinguished panelist is Dr. Izobia Mugisha Beine. Dr. Izobia holds a BA in Social Sciences, an MA in Gender Studies from The Hague, and a PhD in Education from Birmingham University. She's currently the director of the Gender Mainstreaming Division. She's a pioneer staff of this directorate, which was established to mainstream gender in the university. It was established in 2000 when she was just joining the university staff. This directorate was a bold idea from the Department of Women's Studies then, as we were called. She's married with 5 children, and she also said I should highlight that she was a first year in 1990 when the 1.5 program was first introduced. And as we've heard, the 1.5 program was a product of our honorable keynote speaker, as well as Sara Ntiro and many other women in their league. Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Ms. Twasi Mabijirwa. She's a feminist lawyer. She's a writer and a proud alumnus of Makerere University School of Law from 2011 to 2016. She currently works with Segal Family Foundation, where she oversees smart investment into Uganda's visionaries. She holds an LLM from Georgetown University Law Center. You're very welcome. Last but not least is Madame Susan Opok Tumsime. She's the executive director of FAWE Uganda. She's a development practitioner with an experience spanning 15 years. She has held many portfolios, heading many organizations, working in health, education programs, and working with disadvantaged youth. She holds a Master of Science in Management of Natural Resources and Sustainable Agriculture from Norway, and a BA in Economics and Philosophy from Makerere University. She's currently the ED of FAWE Uganda. So you're very welcome. We are going to begin by allowing our panelists say something brief before we go into our Q&A session. So first, we are going to have our key partner who hosted this event, or who enabled this event to occur today. And Reisman, you're going to go first.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Sally. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and it is always a pleasure and an honor to come back to the Makerere University and to partner with the Makerere University on different occasions to push for bold ideas here. And it is really an honor to partner with the Makerere University on this particular lecture, to look into the achievements over the last decades, but also, and I believe it would be very much in the interest of Sara Ntiro, to address the challenges ahead. And me representing an international German political foundation, I would like to address the challenges that we are facing globally. When it comes to women. So coming here, I was talking to one of my colleagues who is an alumna of the Makerere University, and I asked her, what does the name Sara Ntiro means to you? And she said, you know, as much as my family was supporting me in education and was saying, you need to go and you need to learn, the story of Sara Ntiro really empowered me to do so, because it was not only my family now, but I knew, you know, that this is how this is important. So I believe that Sara Ntiro has really been a role model for many, many women. And knowing now that 52% of the graduates of the Makerere University are women, it is a big achievement, and it speaks definitely to what we call educational attainment index, where Uganda has the percentage of 92.4%, meaning that there is a gap of 7.6% to close still to achieve parity between women and men in terms of equal success to education. And if we look at this figure, just to put it a little bit in context, globally we talk about 4.7%, which would take us 22 years still. So we always need to be very cautious with all these figures because they are volatile. We always base them on the current conditions. But now this is interesting, I think, to mention, because as much as a university as an institution can push for different affirmative actions or policies to ensure that more women graduate from the university, universities do not exist in a vacuum. Universities are part of the society, universities are part, of course, of the country's economy, and universities, of course, are also part of the political landscape. So when we look into those figures in terms of education and access to education, we see that the high-income or middle-income countries strike better in terms of access to education than those that are not. And that means that we really need to talk about the systematical approach. It's not just one institution can push for it, or not only institutions of higher education, but these are many policies, and this has been mentioned already, that are affected. Now, when we study, as much as it's, it enriches us, it empowers us, it makes us, questions things, reflect upon them, but education is also means to now go to the labor market, to enter the professional life and contribute with our knowledge to different sectors. And here, when we talk about, in general, the gender gap index, we still have, as global community, 132 years to go under the current conditions to really reach the parity between the genders. And we were in a better place already in the year 2020, when we only had 100 years ahead. So what happened in the last 2 years? The COVID pandemic did, the conflicts did, the wars. So all these factors do also affect the parity issue. Let me maybe come, and interestingly enough, I would love to mention in the sector that I am in, as far as the political empowerment of women is concerned, under the current conditions, we would need 155 years to reach the parity. But now let me just quickly bring it to the activism of Sara Ntiro and her bold action in turning down the salary, because this is also something that is very dear to me, and this is to close the gender pay gap that we still have. And the gender pay gap, and I would like right now to refer to the country where I am from, Germany. We still have a gender pay gap at 18%. So meaning that in general, women receive 18% less than men. What does gender pay gap really mean? And why is it the case? Well, first of all, because women and men are still occupying different professions, positions within the hierarchies. They are also working in different sectors. Let's again take the example of Sara Ntiro. We have many women who work in the care sector or in the education sector and maybe earn less than men who work in the IT sector, in the engineering, and so on. So I come back again to the example that she was first excluded from the studies of mathematics, right? And we still have this. We still have this, the dominance of, certain genders in certain sectors. And of course, we have also the different professional careers. And we all know that for many women, these careers are disrupted when giving birth to a child, when staying at home with a child, or going back and take on a part-time employment. So these are all the factors that contribute to this gender pay gap, but there is also what we call an adjusted gender pay gap. So when we take out all these factors and kind of just compare a woman and a man under the same conditions, same kind of job, let's say, the professional career, same position in the hierarchy and so on, we still come back to the 6% of the difference in the payment between men and women, and this speaks to the case of Sara Ntiro, because she was in a position that was paid differently for men rather than for women. And this is, to me, this adjusted figure is also very interesting, because this figure influences a lot our consciousness and what we think is fair or unfair, where we see women and think, oh, this is their sector, and maybe not. So it contributes a lot and informs a lot what we think also of the gender roles. And I leave it at this point because we might come later in our conversation what we can do about it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. Next, we are going to have Dr. Izobia, and we're also going to give you a few minutes, like 5 minutes, to give us brief remarks. And whilst you're doing so, you are the director of GMD Makerere University. The example of Sara Ntiro is an example of managing against the odds. How is the system today supporting the girl child? Can you share with us some milestones and challenges? The keynote speaker alluded to some of them. Can you give us more? 5 to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Professor Sally, for the opportunity. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I feel privileged to be able to sit here and talk about the gender mainstreaming story of Makerere University. I have been privileged to be part of the story right from the inception. I joined the university in 2000 as an assistant registrar in the academic registrars department. And at that time, the directorate had just been created as part of, as one of the divisions in the academic registrars department. And at that time, most of the groundwork had already been done by the eminent women who were in the Department of Women's Studies then. And perhaps Makerere University's gender mainstreaming story is a typical example of a bold idea that was initiated by particular individuals, but within a supportive system that allowed it to thrive. By the time I joined in 2000, at that time, the head of department was a member of Senate, and most of the groundwork had been written, had been done because there was a project that was the gender mainstreaming project that was supported by the Carnegie Corporation at that time, which was looking at the institutional strengthening, among others, to make sure that Makerere University becomes a more gender-responsive institution than it had been. And the initiative was a partnership between the public, exemplified by the likes of Honorable Joyce Impanga, who was in the public sector at that time, Then the academia, driven by the likes of Professor Joy Kwesiga, Dr. Maxine Ankra, and who were in this at that time, and also who doubled as members of the civil society organization, and particularly Action for Development, where I am currently privileged to be the chairperson of the board. The relationship between the different sectors was very clear at that time, and I am glad that this year, during the celebration to mark the 30 years of gender studies in Africa, where we held a conference, that relationship was emphasized to be extremely important in terms of making sure that we, as institutions, respond to the need for gender responsiveness, which the gender mainstreaming program is aimed at achieving. I was a fresher in 1990 when the 1.5 was instituted. I had no idea whether I would have come to the university or not, but for me at that time it didn't matter. The most important thing was that I had an opportunity to join the university. And at that time, because of the close connection between the academia and civil society, we were recruited into the women's movement. And I remember as undergraduates, we attended the monthly meetings of Action for Development, which I'm sure Honorable Mpanga can relate to. And for me, the story, I've never looked back. God, the women were very inspiring. All the things they talked about was very exciting. And I remember on one of the meetings where the Action for Development was electing the board members, Sara Ntiro was the chair of the Electoral Commission. And it was extremely exciting. So I feel privileged to be here when we are talking about the role of Sara Ntiro and others who shared the same dream. Makerere University, I think, has set the pace in terms of gender mainstreaming within the universities. And our mandate is guided by two main policies of the university. The gender equality policy, which was formulated in 2009 and has been reviewed this year, and Council passed the reviewed policy this year in March, and also the policy and regulations against sexual harassment. And Honorable Joyce Mpanga alluded to the challenges relating to this. The university is very clear about where we want to go, whatever the challenges are. And we, as Gender Mainstreaming Directorate, we are happy to provide the coordination aspect, and we are more than committed to making sure that this bold idea becomes reality and Makerere University becomes more gender responsive. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Izobia. You've really shared a lot. Next, I'm going to the ED of FAWE. You heard our keynote speaker say, the struggles that FAWE was formed to achieve and how central our icon we are celebrating today was at that center. So my question to you is, what are the kind of struggles that FAWE is championing for today? And could you share with us some of the issues you think we needed to know and what Sara Ntiro would have said about what you're doing as FAWE? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Just to begin by saying, as the speakers were talking about Sara Ntiro, I recalled, because I met her, I shared a hotel room with her, but also as I was working for Peace Uganda once upon a time, we invited her. At the time, I was the executive director of Peace Uganda. We invited her to Mayuge to launch one of the Peace schools. So, having interacted with her and listening to what is said about her, I could see her. I could actually visualize her and feel her, and remembering how we shared a hotel room, and she went to this room that she'd been given, and the curtains are this, the bed is like this, she wanted everything in a certain way. So when Enid was talking about her, I just visualized it, and it was very interesting and a good memory. So we also named one of the schools in Mayuge under, with her names, Sara Ntiro Secondary Peace School. So that was really interesting. But I would like to also to pay honor to Madame Rhoda Kalema, as well as this keynote speaker, who are great founders and members of FAWE Uganda. FAWE Uganda's mandate, as has been said, was to see how best to bring women into the decision-making process. Started in 1992 as a Pan-African organization. It today has 34 chapters within Africa, FAWE Uganda being one of them. And FAWE Uganda was begun in 1997 to see how best we could facilitate the mandate of girls' participation in education, participation and completion of education. So today we talk about over 8,000, 10,000 girls that have been supported and seen through FAWE Uganda as we celebrate our Silver Jubilee this year. So looking at the question and what FAWE does, we do protection. One, of course, is the support to education for young people and especially girls. And this goes at various levels, secondary, skills training, as well as university. And I know that we have a lot of young people that we support at the university or higher education. We also do protection, and that is to deal with prevention of violence against children, as well as violence against women. The other thing that we do is research, because as you may know, we are key advocates, and in order to advocate for the education of girls, we need evidence. So we undertake a lot of researches to ensure that we provide evidence to government and to stakeholders that we work with. And the most recent study, of course, has been looking at the situation of an impact of COVID-19 on school-going girls and young women. We also did a study on the linkages between school dropout, pregnancy and school dropout, and also a study on the relationship or impact of COVID-19 on the persons, on the employability and education of persons with disability. We are currently doing a study to assess whether, following the COVID situation, children or girls actually returned to school, and if they returned, what is happening? Were they supported? What kind of infrastructure or systems are there to ensure that they actually access education and stay in school so that they can complete and become useful citizens of this country? Because at the end of the day, we are looking at girls and women leading dignified lives. As I talk about girls and women, FAWE does not only look at girls and women, we consider boys as well. So our support is on a 70-30% ratio. So what are the struggles? The struggles have been gender inequality or inequity in terms of education, and that led to the reason that the 5 ministers of education that started FAWE came through and initiated the institution. Now, the fact that girls are sent to school, the cultural norms still inhibit girls' education. To date, we are in the 21st century, but we still have challenges. In the post-COVID era, we found that girls got pregnant. The 2-year close down of school realized that there was a lot of girls that got pregnancy. In the study that we did, that was a national study looking at 25 districts of Uganda. Because of the media information, we decided to seek evidence. And what did we find out? That in just 3 months of the pandemic, that is March to June, there was a 22.5% increase in the rate of pregnancies for the 10 to 24-year-olds. And looking at the 10 to 14-year-olds, it was 366.5%. So our girls have been abused, our girls have been raped, our girls have been lured. And many of these girls today are child mothers or young mothers, if I may say. They are looked at as adults. How do we distinguish between an adult and a child? And so who is a parent in these circumstances? Because the moment these girls get pregnant, give birth, they are assumed to be parents, and yet they have lost a childhood. So how do we support this kind of state? The other thing is menstrual hygiene issues. Because of poverty, there's a lot of menstrual hygiene challenges in the schools, but also the system probably is not as adequate as should be. Because we find schools that have been constructed, there is no water, the latrines probably don't have doors or don't shut well. In some schools, boys and girls are sharing latrines. So there is no water, even as we talk about water. I know that the Ministry of Education or Government of Uganda has created some systems that should support, but I'm not sure that the resources that are available are adequate to support the education of girls, so that, and to help them to really remain in school, have the kind of support systems in terms of counseling, because we talk about senior women, senior male teachers, we talk about counselors. Are these people actually in schools? The materials that we utilize, what are the materials? They still show the girls as the nurses and the sweepers and so on, and show the boys as, the engineers and so on and so forth. So there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I know that when FAWE started the Sara Ntiro Awards, it was an initiation of some Gayaza girls that were on the FAWE board. They, having had Sara Ntiro as a teacher at Gayaza High School, decided that we should have the Sara Ntiro Awards. So these awards were looking initially at the girls that were being supported by FAWE, although eventually it was opened up to the public, and it looked at women of distinction and women of excellence. So that was some women that were looking or working within the girls' arena, and then also women that had made a contribution towards girls' education and girls' issues. So that the awards were given for about 10 years, and that was the work of FAWE and the Ministry of Education. And we are glad and happy that today we celebrate the life of Sara Ntiro. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. We heard that we are supposed to save time for Runyege. So after our last speaker, we are going to come to you, the audience, to ask questions, but you can also be writing down the questions and they come straight here so that we try to redeem the time. Our next speaker is going to be Patricia. Patricia is a very bold person. She represents a bold young generation. You heard that Sara Ntiro really campaigned for social justice, whether it was for education for the girl child or for equal pay. You also heard from our honorable keynote speaker that we should not block the way. Yet today, when I encounter many younger people, especially including the females, we take a lot for granted. We have forgotten that the positions we occupy were struggled for, in some cases actually real struggled for, and people paid a high price for us to be here. And maybe this has also brought people to think probably some of these things are not worth it. So as a young person and as a feminist lawyer, how can we achieve social justice for women and also including men? Like you've heard, COVID affected both So how can we achieve social justice?
Central to systemic and institutional change have been trivialized and relegated to the peripheries of history books. And that's the legacy that we must continue to challenge and to contend with. And so, of course, it's fitting that Makerere, our great institution, is celebrating 100 years at the time when, as a continent and as a world, we are asking what the next 100 years will look like, right? So shaped by the global pandemic and the realities of mass inequalities and the persistent of socio-economic political challenges that significantly affect those of us who sit on the margins of society. This continues to include young women, it includes poor people, it includes our relatives in the far ends that we often ignore or forget about. So in thinking about what the next 100 years will look like and whether or not we will actually rise to the challenge of reshaping our societies in this post-pandemic era, especially as Africans, the question of a decolonized education system that seeks not just to teach, right, but to really educate and support disruptive ideas, such as the ones that Sara, Roger Kalema, Joyce Mpanga, Sylvia Tamale, and others have started can't be taken for granted. And that's really the basis upon which I want us to focus on. What does investing in the education of young people in this country, of young people on this continent look like? A kind of education that encourages them to see themselves first and foremost as participants in our society. A kind of education that allows them to feel proud of where they come from, that focuses on our strengths, not only as Ugandans, but as Africans, right? To build onto that which has been started by our greats. And so that's really the work that the next couple of years are going to look like. When we think about the effects of COVID in the last 3 or so years, right? And we're still in a pandemic, technically. When we think about COVID, we also recognize that Uganda was one of the places that had the longest school closure, right? And that when this closure was, people who were disproportionately affected are the ones who were then, right? So education funding to cut, and that's a great loss. Teenage mothers were refused to go back to most public schools, and that's a great loss. And those are the persistent challenges that we continue to have to grapple with. And only by being bold enough to demand better, not only of ourselves, but of our institutions and of our government, can we actually do the work of transforming in the ways that we want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, my distinguished panel. Can we see by show of hands those who would like to ask questions? If you can't raise your hand, please feel free to write on a piece of paper and the mics will get to you, or you give it to one of the ushers. Can we see all those who would like to ask the questions? And please remember to direct the question to whoever you want it directed to, and they will be answered. Yes. I think we can take like 5. No, there are these 3 in the middle. There are some 2 at the other end.
For your time and for recognizing such a great leader. I was almost listening to her story, and my is going to be what happened to that the class. The rest of that story, because it can, her life and what, on the sea, and she came. So my first question happened that man going there. My second question, yes, and I'm going to start in this way. There's a scripture, I think it's in Matthew, chapter 14, I think 24, and it concludes like this, and it was 5,000 men, women and children were not counted. And I would like to recognize that for very many years, there has been a compounded mindset where women have not been recognized. And therefore, those who are fighting for women emancipation and those who are fighting for the rights of women are doing a very great job. And over the years, if we look at the Roman Empire, women were not recognized. Before that, I have given an example of the Bible and all through the years. There is a challenge. You talked about 70-30. And the example you gave was in lockdown. I'm a bit concerned, and I would like you to help elucidate how you're handling this. The girls were pregnant, yes, very many of them. I come from Nebi, and there were thousands. It's very threatening, the number of girls who got pregnant, very many of them. Who are the people who are making these girls pregnant? They are men, right? Who are the parents who slept with their daughters? They were still men. Who are the ones who usually battle these women? They are men. So, apart from the formal education in your 70-30, I am proposing that you can change maybe the strategy. First of all, my strategy would be 60-40, and then it would be directed not in the formal education style, but in the mindset style towards the young boys. Because these young, as we focus on the girls, we forget that when we prepare them, they will finally end up with a man who's not prepared to handle the girl. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There was a hand behind you in a white t-shirt. We can have another usher with a mic to the other extreme end.
Yes, thank you. By the names, I'm Opeitu Filbert, a patriot, a Pan-Africanist. Mine, first of all, goes to Honorable Joyce Mpanga. I appreciate you for the work you did for this nation. Mine is not a question, it is going to be like a request, because if I am to ask, it is going to be a long question. This one goes specifically to Patricia. I want to join you. Am I welcomed? Thank you.
Okay, there was someone behind you, the third.
Thank you very much. My name is Mildred Loy Nandera. I'm a student of gender studies. So my question goes directly to the head of Gender Mainstreaming Directorate. In 2020, I joined Makerere University in 2021, and a number of girls joined, we joined a number of girls. So by this time, I'm realizing that many girls have dropped out of, they have left the struggle. So that makes me realize that there is something wrong with the gender mainstreaming. So my question is, how sustainable do you think that we can make gender mainstreaming to help girls complete their university education? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Issa, as you go on, there are two hands there and other two hands, then we shall come back this way.
Thank you very much for the wonderful lecture and the presentation from the panelists. Florence Sebila from the School of Women and Gender Studies. My question goes perhaps to the family. I'm sorry, I was listening online first and then I came in. Maybe I missed this. There's interest in the autobiography of Sara Ntiro that has been written by Femwright, and scholars who are interested in reading about her life are wondering, when is that autobiography coming out? Was it talked about when I was on the way coming? I would just like to know that if anyone on the panel is aware of that, or if the family can give us insights into that. And secondly, to Dr. Zobia, this is perhaps a reflection. What happened to the feminism of the 1990s when we were students coming to Makerere and we were excited and going to Oxford and participating? How can we encourage current students to be students as well as activists? I was seated here and amazed at how we were on social media, how we were on our phones. How can we encourage students to really embrace activism? Thank you. There's a hand behind her.
Thank you much for the lecture. My question is directed to Miss Anne. It's about the gender pay gap. Some of the reasons that you suggested that are causing this gender pay gap is about the different professional careers. So my question is, in the different career guidance programs that are always designed to maybe guide people on the different careers that they choose, is this emphasized to make sure that the girls or women take up these different careers that are perceived to be generally for men?
Okay, thank you. There are two people who had their hands up first. Yeah, those two, yeah.
Good evening to you all. Gloria Nabunya is my name, and I have two questions. Question one is about what Associate Professor Sara was talking about, that women are now in the positions that the previous activists fought for, but women are playing in those positions. I wouldn't say playing, but something like that. Or they're taking them for granted. My question is, okay, no, it's not actually a question, but most of the times, what I see, according to what I see, most of the women are in the, not most of them, but some women are in the positions through tokenism. As you can see, for example, the political position, it is through tokenism. So my question is, yes, these women are there. Instead of us saying, maybe they are joking with these positions, my question is, how are we going to help these women that have made it to these positions, maybe through tokenism or other processes? How are we going to help these women get on the same page with the feminists, or get on the same pages with the other women? Then the other question is about, this goes straight to the ED of Fawe. The ED of Fawe was talking about, of course, the challenges they're facing with the community, of course, with the the teenage pregnancies, child marriages. Okay, she talked about culture. And my question is, what are we doing? Okay, it's not actually a question, but you know, when you look at these things, yes, when you look at these things, they are cultural gatekeepers in the community, and that is why girls are still getting pregnant, child marriage is still there. When a girl, for example, when a girl goes for pooling, this girl, the parents or the aunties will look at this girl as she's prepared for marriage. So my question is, what are we doing about the culture gatekeepers? Thank you.
Okay, yeah, there was a hand behind you. The girl behind you had her hand up first.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Naluwama Teopista, and my question is about the insecurities, both in school and in the environment around the girl child. How is the girl child going to be secured? Like we see many girls, they are killed, maybe their boyfriends, like even sometimes staff of their schools, even people outside. There are many fraudulent people who are targeting girls. For example, if I come to Makerere and then like someone steals my phone, then I go back, I tell my young sister that they stole my phone at campus. If you go to campus, life is not easy. So that my young sister will also be discouraged to come to campus, and that will break the chain of education. So are we going to secure the young children, the girls, so that they be secure of their education and their lives?
Okay, thank you very much. Lastly, Dr. Dafinagaba down here, as our panel prepares to answer the questions that we received.
Thank you very much. I feel like I've won an award already for actually getting the attention of the moderator. So mine is very easy or simple for me. There is always this chasm or distance between, let's say, the founders, the members, the women who came before us, the ones who have started the revolution, the women's revolution, the women's movement, so to speak, and the young people. On the one hand, you have the older people or the older generation saying, we feel like the young people are uninvolved, uninterested. We feel they are not appreciative. We feel like they take everything for granted. They have a spirit of, we handed this to you, so you should be more appreciative. On the other hand, you have the younger people accusing the older people of gatekeeping, of ageism, of not wanting to leave positions, of wanting things to be the way they were, of not finding ways of creatively involving the young people. My question is maybe to Dr. Zobia and maybe Bijira. How do we bridge that gap? We need each other. We need both these people. How do we try to bridge that gap? How do we appreciate each other rather than sort of pulling ropes? And then on the other hand, you have the men looking at us and saying, okay, so you're talking about gender inequality, but we are also seeing a lot of infighting between you. How do we join this movement when we are also confused about what is going on? So that is my question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. There's a small announcement here. The owner of UBH 790H, Harrier, your windscreen is down and it's threatening to rain. Can you write them and they come? Yeah, write the questions and they come. Half a minute each of you. I don't know whether the microphone is. Because this is Sara Ntiro's day. She loved girls, and the ones who have raised hands are girls. So half a second each of you. Half a minute, sorry.
Thank you very much. I just feel that the audience you have right now is so educated, and we own smartphones, we know very much. I feel like you people should always reach out to even village people who have not gone to school. Those girls are really doing bad. And we always feel that these feminists, the women, all they do is sit and speak good English, put on bitenje and go to nice hotels, but they don't really reach out to that person, so I think it is really time for you ladies. Some NGOs even don't make sense, like UN Women.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Push point noted. The one at the back.
Thank you. I'm going to Tamilike Michael from...
Move to the front so that they don't grab your chance again.
From Ndege University.
Half a minute, please.
But my origin is from Makerere. Mine goes to ED Fawe. I appreciate what you do for the girls, but my concern is to uplift girls from disadvantaged families. But it's unfortunate that you find that people are from well-to-do families are the beneficiaries. So like as an institution, as an organization, what are you doing to bring that down? Thank you.
Okay, and lastly you, and then we move.
Thank you, Dr. Sally. So mine is in regard to the theme. I'd like to hear from any of the panelists really. If we look at, because they're saying that the bold ideas need system support to thrive. and the case of Sara Ntiro. So I'd like to know if we reflect on the system in this country or in our institutions, or generally, are we saying that we are supporting both ideas, also looking at struggles of Sara Ntiro and people in her generation, if they have, they fought so that certain things don't stay the same, but then also generations after them are still fighting for the same things. I'd like for us to address that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so our time is fast spent. We are going to have our panelists have at least 3 minutes each to wrap up your questions. And as you wrap up, please let us give a word of wisdom to the younger people of what Sara Ntiro would have said to them if she was here today. We have those questions that have been asked, and there are also very many questions that have come in on paper. So 3 minutes each of you, and we wrap up this.
Thank you very much for those questions. I have 3 which I must respond to if I can. What happened to the activism of the 1990s? I think that is a very fundamental question. I think the biggest challenge has been the pushback, which is also somehow evident even in this room. This morning I was listening to the Uganda Bureau of Statistics when they were launching the 6th annual Gender Statistics Day. And the speakers talked about gender-based violence, and annually we are in the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And the statement was 95% of women in Uganda from 15 to 49, now from Susan, I hear even from 10, have experienced a form of gender-based violence in their time. So if we are talking about the fact that men are also being marginalized, what exactly are we talking about? And I want to challenge the men in this room. If Sara Ntiro was to be here today, she would tell you that get involved. Don't just wait to blame the women's movement for leaving the men behind. My challenge to you is, what have you done to advance this cause? And I'm saying that because of our topic, bold ideas should be allowed by institutions to thrive. The university, for example, has put in place a system of gender mainstreaming. Please take time to get involved. What is it about? What are we talking about? Every time we organize a discussion of this nature, many times we shy away. Please take an active role. And we need to emulate the likes of Ntiro and her contemporaries who mobilized young people in this room. We used to walk to Action for Development to participate in those meetings. We didn't even have transport to go there. Young people today, can you get involved in the activism? Because there is a very important relationship between individual action and institutional systems. From my experience, the women that we are talking about, the likes of Rhoda Karema, Joyce Mpanga, they did not sit. Sara Ntiro, look at her activism at that time by protesting about unequal pay for the same work with the same qualifications. We really have to exercise our individual agency so that we can thrive within a system. The likes of Kwesiga, who started the Department of Women's Studies at that time, they were exercising individual agency, but also functioning within a system. So all of us have to take our individual activism so that we can create the change that we would want to. And then lastly, the relationship between the founder members and the young people is about, again, taking individual agency, because they can call upon you, but if you don't come, nothing will change. And for me, my challenge to the young people is just get involved, engage with the ideas, challenge the so-called older women so that together we can make a contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really couldn't have said it better, because I would, if there is a word of wisdom, I would really bring it to the personal, individual responsibility of each of us. Many questions, and I would like to address the question on professional guidance, the question on cultural framework, and on insecurity. But many questions sound like, so what are we doing, or what is the society doing? And again, I think it's really valid to say, but what are you doing yourself? Because you're part of it. You're part of the society, you're part of your family, you are contributing to the culture. Culture is not static, it's evolving. You are shaping all of these spaces, and you need to have an active role in it as a citizen to really shape these spaces. We talk about, so professional guidance, yes, of course there need to be pictures and professional guidance that girl can excel in any sector, really in any. And it starts as early as in school books, for example, where we see images of girls in certain sectors or boys. So we need to pay attention to this. But for example, private companies need also to pay attention. How do they portray women in advertisement and so on? What do we see in films? We have here students from the music and film faculty. So all of us should play a part. And so when it comes, for example, to the cultural framework and to the insecurity, challenge the culture around you. Praise what is good, what you want to take on, what makes you an individual, what forms your identity, but question where, there are practices that maybe disadvantage you. It's fine to do so. And now, because there are many girls in the room, and bringing it to the individual responsibility, it's not only about activism, but it's also about your very personal choices in life. You will form families. You will educate children. Be very much aware of whom you want to go this journey with. Will this be your partner in life who really supports you to make the choices that you want to make for your own future, for the future of the partner and the generations to come? Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia, next.
Okay, I'm going to try and just respond to almost everything that was sort of directed at me. Yes. Okay, so to start off, I feel like there's this illusion that young people in this country are disinterested in the affairs of their country. And I would really just like to argue that that's just what it is, an illusion. Because when I think about a lot of the disruptive changes that are being pushed, I think about young people, right? I think about the Uganda Women's March in 2018 that was organized entirely on social media by young people as a Pan-African movement in protest to the killings of women at that time in this country, right? That's young people. I think about young people like Tracy Ahumuza, who have begun, she recently began a breast milk bank because she saw a need, right? I think about people like Solomon King of Fundibots, who is disrupting STEM education in this country. So it's really a half-truth that young people are somewhat disinterested, right? And of course, the activism of the 90s will look different from the activism of 2022, right? Because we build on what was started, and because we are not static, and because we evolve, and because we are individuals, right? But it is also a function really of patriarchy to imagine that we are in competition with each other, that the young and the old are fighting. I don't believe that that's true. When I think about myself, I think about everything that I have learned from people like Sylvia Tamale, and from Dr. Sali, and from Joyce Mpanga, and Sara Ntiro, and all the ones who came before us, right? And it's truly, to be African is to acknowledge those who have come before you, because only through acknowledging that can you build something new. So I would like to dissuade us from narratives that push a single story, which is not entirely the truth of how we coexist and work together in our societies. I would also like to speak to this question of, we have bold ideas, but do we actually have system support? Now, the jury is still kind of out on that one, but the preliminary findings really tilt towards not enough, right? Not enough. It's one thing for us to have creative ideas as individuals. It's another for those ideas to be truly supported by institutions and systems for which that is their mandate, right? And I think that we have to contend with the legacy of that reality, of the fact that young people in this country are continually struggling because there's nobody to hold their hands, whether it's through business, whether it's through activism, whether it's through anything, right? We need that system, those systems to actually be functioning in the ways that they need to be functioning. Even if we're just to look at the education sector in of itself alone, right? I think we can really speak to the very many limitations that young people in this country have to suffer through just because they're Ugandan, and just because our systems are as in flux as they continually are. And finally, the question of education access, right, which is really in many ways the legacy of Sara Ntiro. What kind of education do we have? I mean, we're still learning in 2022 that John Speake discovered Lake Victoria. It's many seemingly small things like that, but those shape narratives. They shape how we feel about our countries, how we feel about our continent, how we see our own individual and collective roles in our society. And without actively working towards addressing those very many gaps within our education system, those gaps that dictate that if you have more money, then you have a better access to education, and then leave so many others on the margins of society. Only by addressing those structural and institutional challenges that still persist in our country specifically, can we ever hope to have as wholly inclusive a society as the Saras fought for then. Thanks.
Susan, you have the greatest number of questions, but you still have 3 minutes.
Okay,
because they are all around the same theme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will start with the fact that what would Sara say today? She would say that Uganda give girls an opportunity for an education. I think that's the best that we can give to any young person, and especially the girls, given especially the circumstances around them. We must educate every young girl, and we must ensure that as they get educated, they are supported within that environment so that they are able to thrive. 2 is that it is yours and my responsibility to make Uganda a better place. And so, how do we set the systems that you and I should be a part of the process to ensure that the systems work and not be a deterrent, as many of us are in our offices and in the places, or, especially of leadership that we actually take on. So many questions have come through. The question on insecurity: how can we ensure that we are safe, that girls are safe, that the community is safe? The challenge today is that a lot of young people want easy things. You can see that Sara went through a lot of challenges to achieve. We want easy fixes. There are no easy fixes. 2, we must create an opportunity for self-awareness. Girls, you must be self-aware. What do you want? What is your future supposed to be like? How can I know that this is what Susan wants? My colleague Anne has talked about choices. What are the choices that you make? Because that determines who you are and whether you're safe or not. We are talking about how FAWE can support girls or boys. Yes, there is an issue to do with the mindset. The cultural norms are so ingrained. Today, we are talking about a change of the culture. Nonetheless, because the world has been male-dominated, we still are so excited about that, and the girl needs to be subdued to agree to what is there. So how can we ensure that we change that kind of outlook? And this is not about competition, it is about coexistence. We must coexist, and so the mindset, our mindset, your mindset, everyone's mindset needs to change. Recently, I attended a marriage ceremony, and some of us may know the saying that, or the outlook or perspective that women do not come to discuss the issues around marriage. It's only the men. And you know, I was in shock because this is the 21st century going into the 22nd century, and my brothers and fathers and uncles still think that as a woman educated with a position, I should sit behind and allow them to talk about my daughters, my nieces, you know. So we need a change of mindset. Gentlemen, it is not competition, it is coexistence. And this world can only become better if we can coexist and share ideas and support each other. Because without you, I can't be, and without me, you can't be. Just lastly, there was a question about FAWE supporting more young people. Yes, this year FAWE has marked 25 years, and we have been trying to do a local fundraising. FAWE is a membership organization, so everyone can join us and become a member and contribute to the cause of education. But also, we have majorly received grants from the external donors and funders. We would like for us as Ugandans to be responsible for the kind of society we want to be. And so we are calling upon each and every one of you to come along and join FAWE so that we can support more girls. Our commitment has been that we would like to send 2,000 girls to school next year. Nonetheless, I know that we did not get the kind of funding that we need to support that kind of numbers. So we are calling upon you, because everyone can say that I'm supporting, but we want to create a culture. We want to form a certain human being, a certain value system in Uganda so that we are all together. Otherwise, it's not just about paying fees, but helping the young persons through mentorship, through psychosocial support, through a lot of other system support frameworks so that we can get the kind of people we want in Uganda, but we can also be the country that we'd like to have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a question to the family about the autobiography. When is it coming out? When should people begin preparing to read it?
Thank you for the interest. I think you've seen the pull-ups there. Less than 6 months it should be out.
Okay, also, the member of family also wants to comment something?
Thank you very much. I shall be brief. One of the things my mother did was to fundraise as the Uganda Association of University Women and FAWE to assist girls to complete secondary school.
So my challenge, as the speaker said, at the African and the international level, is if we can have that 15% going to the education sector, I think more will be included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That ties in very well with a note we received about organizing a fundraising, of organizing the alumni to raise funds to educate more children under the Sara Ntiro initiative. We shall leave that for the University Governing Council and mark at 100 to take forward. There are a few other questions which came here, what's being done to include boys in the struggle, because many boys at Makerere University still have a gender bias in promoting gender equality and don't want to associate themselves with gender people. Then also with empowered girls. There was also the question of want the empowered girl face challenges dealing with unempowered boys. I think most of the people have tried to address this in one way or another, but like you've heard, it's about taking charge of your life. If someone is uncomfortable with you being an educated girl, I don't think that's the person you should think of settling with, because you're not going to reverse your education. So you're going to continue being educated. So if the person is insecure with your status, that could be a problem. You need to reflect. And someone also sent a comment that they found this panel very interesting, because normally they have panels of men or several men and one woman, so they are happy that today's panel was largely women. There was a small question to Madam Joyce Impanga about what happened to that lecturer who walked out. Do you think you want to answer that one?
I'm afraid I don't know what happened, but that was colonial times. And he was European. Sara was honor student from Budo. I think nobody took it up. There was nothing like when you say you have a system of complaining about harassment and so on, and people will answer. We just, even a student could walk out. Sometimes we also had students who walked out on lecturers and nothing happened.
So that's tribute to our university and our council that we've come a long way. That these days there are all manners of complaints. You can actually complain even when you think the mark you're given was not the right one. You can write to the dean contesting the mark a lecturer has been given, and we shall find someone else to mark. So we've come a long way. And as we wind up, I would just like to maybe make a note of a few things. There was someone who made a comment about the movie. The head of performing arts and film is actually an expert in filmmaking. Probably would like to encourage her in the US to do a collabo and apply for a RIF and make, the US can be a very good copy, and you make a movie about Sara Ntiro, it will help encourage us very well. The autobiography question has been answered. Maybe just lastly, I would also like to announce that these matters have not settled. Even when we look like the activism is not like the one of the 90s, work continues. And one of the things the university is doing for the 16 days of activism, instead of the usual where the School of Gender Studies would talk to students, this year's 16 days of activism is being handled by the Makerere Debating Union, and we are having inter-college debates. Can I see all the members of the debating teams? Yeah, there are quite a number behind. So far we have 105 pairs that have applied to debate across the cycle. Last Saturday we did a launch with our partners, UN Women, FIDA, and all Ministry of Gender, UNDP that are coming on board. This Saturday we are going to have the semi-finals, the quarterfinals and the semi-finals. All the students from all the colleges are participating in these debates, and the theme is gender-based. How do we tackle gender-based violence at Makerere University?
It is tying in together with the theme, and of course the MDU students, Makerere Debating Union students, the leadership comes from the School of Law, so we would like to appreciate that. So please look out for the dates, come and participate, come and listen to our younger people debate the issue of GBV at Makerere University. This whole week they are undergoing training in debating, but also training in key gender and feminist concepts. So I think with that, I would like to end our panel here and hand over to our MC. I think our timing has expired.
Thank you very much, Professor Sara Sali and your team. May we give them a round of applause for the fantastic.
Don't forget the runyeki.
I promised you 5-star 5 course, so now we go for the dessert, and it only has 2 elements. One, we have a young artist who wants to hand over gifts, one to the family and one to Honorable Joyce Impanga. You have 1 minute to finish everything. I will request to watch you Daudi Impanga and Fiona to join Mama on the stage. Yes, please come this way.
In her legacy, Sara Ntiro, in a lead to fight for bold ideas to get support, and as women also, we as a young generation of boys also join in her lead to make sure that we make it happen. And as we as Makerere University, we also try to build a transformed society through talent for the better future. Thank you. This is a portrait to be presented to our keynote speaker. I'm by names of Ainaman Bran, a student of drama and film, year 2.
And now, thank you very much. I will now request the family and the chairperson of council to please join the panelists and the on the podium so that we can have a group photo. The panelists, please stay on the platform. And the EMS as well, please join. Professor Nawang, unfortunately, you can't. There is no way you can disappear once you are around. So please join us for the photo. Yes, the family, please. Olunyege closes. thank the organizers. We would like to thank Dr. Anne Ninsima from the School of Women and Gender Studies who put this together with the theme of March at 100. Thank you and goodbye.